Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshwari Mata ki jai. We'll continue with chapter 35 from Devi, the Devi Bhagavatam retold by Ramesh Menon. Janamejaya considered the story for a moment. Then he said, Muni, why were these Kshatriyas called Haihayas? Did they have an ancestor called Haihaya? Vedavyasa said, once Ravanta, Surya's son, and himself, a splendid deva, was riding on Uchasravas, the sun's own mount. He was riding to Vaikuntha to see Lord Vishnu. It happened that the Devi Mahalakshmi saw that youth flying through the sky. She stood entranced by the luminous spectacle, for of course she too had once been churned alive but from the Kasha Sagara, and Uchasravas was her brother. Her heart went out to her equine sibling. Vishnu also saw the bright youth that rode towards them and said, Devi, who is that magnificent boy? But she was so absorbed by the sight in the sky outside that she did not seem to hear him. Vishnu repeated his question a little more loudly. My love, who is that youth on the horse of light? Still she did not answer, but stood gazing raptly at Uchasravas. It seems Vishnu repeated himself thrice and then grew annoyed. He came up behind her, laid his hand on her shoulder, and cried sharply, what is it that enchants you so much that you won't answer me? Does the sight of that horse bewitch you, that you refuse to speak to me? Is the sight of that horse, is your heart not content here with me? Perhaps that you gaze so raptly at the sky will be born in the restless world then, Lakshmi. Be born as a mare, since you are so attracted by horses. Now she trembled with fear. Soft cries came from her again and again. She fell at her lord's feet and said, Oh, Deva, I have never seen you angry with me before. You have cursed me to a dreadful fate. Where is your deep love for me now? Here, Uchasravas is my brother, and so I gazed at him. How will I live without you for even a moment? No, I would rather end my life at once than be separate from you. Vishnu said sadly, the curse may not be withdrawn, but when you have a son in the world who resembles me in all parts, it shall end, and you will return to Vaikuntha and be by my side. When Ravanta heard Narayana curse Lakshmi, he was terrified. Turning Uchasravas round in a blur, he flew back to his father, Suryadeva, and told him what had happened. Tears in her perfect eyes, Sri Lakshmi knelt at her blue lord's feet to say farewell to him, from whom she had never been parted for even a day since he first took her for his own beside the sea of foam, the very hour she was born. The next moment, the curse took effect. The goddess of fortune turned into a shimmering mare, and she fell down into the world, into the place where the sun's wife, Charya, once sat in Tapasya, the confluence of the Kalinda and the Tamasa. Deep emerald forest loomed all around it, and she found herself north of the blessed Vana. Sri Lakshmi sat under a spreading tree and meditated upon Lord Shiva, the auspicious one who fulfills all desires. She imagined him with his trishul in his hand. The cool rayed crescent moon peeped out from his jata. He had 5 fair faces, each one with 3 eyes. His throat was vivid blue, where he had once quaffed smoking poison. He had 10 arms. His skin was white as camphor. He wore a tiger skin around his waist, and his skin was his elephant hide across his chest. And bright cobras twined themselves around him like ornaments. He wore a garland of human skulls around his throat. Half his body was female, where Gauri was part of him. Thus Lakshmi Devi pictured the Lord Shankara before her mind's eye as she stood in tapasya, motionless. 1,000 years she, the mare, stood there in intense dhyan, and one day Mahadeva Shiva appeared before her, mounted on his huge Nandishwar, and he was more glorious than she had ever imagined him to be. The Devi Parvati sat before him on the great bull's back, and she was entirely beautiful. Shiva came surrounded by his wild ganas. He said to Lakshmi, Devi, you are the mother of all the stars. Your Lord Vishnu is master of the universe. How are you here, thus as a mare, and worshipping me? A woman's dharma lies with her own husband's, O Devi. Yet you have turned all your thoughts to me in fervor. Why, O daughter of the sea? Lakshmi, the mare, said to him, Mahadev, most auspicious one, my husband has cursed me. Only you, O Shambhu, can save me from his curse. Vishnu said to me, when you have a son in this world like me in all parts, my curse shall end and you will return to me in Vaikuntha. But Shiva, how can I have a son when my husband is not with me? I committed no crime, my lord, but only gazed at my brother as he flew across the sky. Lord, you and Vishnu are not apart from each other. You are the same person, the same eternal essence of all things. Thus, when I worship you, I only worship my Lord Vishnu, no other, and I did not sin by doing this. Shiva smiled. He said, tell me how you know that Vishnu and I are the same. Why, the Devas and the greatest rishis always make a difference between us, but you say we are the same person. Who told you this? O Shri, are you sure it is true? The mare said, O Shiva, once I saw my Lord Vishnu sit in Padasana upon the ground, and he was sunk in deep meditation. When he rose from his contemplation, I asked him, Vishnu, you are the greatest God. Brahma and the other devas worship you. But today I see that you are sitting in dhyan yourself. On whom do you meditate? He said to me, I meditate in the lotus of my heart upon Mahadeva, Lord Shiva, the highest Deva, who sometimes meditates upon me, and I at times upon him. For our hearts are one bloom in the most secret way, and there is, in truth, no difference between him and me. So indeed, Shiva, do I turn my heart to you and dhyan, for you are my Vishnu as well. So I beg you to find a way for my Lord to come to me, that I may have a child by him and return to his side in Vaikuntha, said Lakshmi, the shining mare. Shiva thought for just a moment, then said, I will send your Vishnu to you, and you shall have a son by him, I swear it. With that he vanished. Shiva went back to sacred Kailash. He had a Gana called Chitrarupa, who was an expert in such embassy. Shiva sent that Gana to Vaikuntha. This Gana could assume any form he chose with just a wish, and it was told on Kailash that he had never looked the same on any 2 days in all time. Indeed, the other Ganas said that Chitrarupa's infinite appearances mimicked all of the men born on earth through all the ages, and he had no form that was truly his own. But today he went as a most resplendent being to meet Vishnu. Arriving swiftly in a Vimana, Chitrarupa saw the gates of Vishnu's palace, which stood at the heart of an unearthly garden, dotted with fine pools and lakes and pristine trees. Magical birds sang from the branches, and the very air seemed laden with soft music. Vishnu's guards, Jaya and Vijaya, greeted Chitrarupa. When he told them whom he had come from, they hurried away to tell their blue master of his arrival. Soon Shiva's Duta was shown into the presence of Mahavishnu. It is told when the extraordinary Gana stood before Vishnu, he assumed several forms in a few moments in the ecstasy of seeing the Lord, and finally prostrated himself before Vishnu as a stick of fragrant sandalwood. Vishnu laughed in delight and asked, "Tell me, wonderful messenger, what word you bring from Shiva?" Chitrarupa said, and his voice was his Lord Shiva's voice, "Your Devi, Sri Lakshmi, mother of the worlds, whom the Yakshas, Kinnaras, Nagas, and Devas all worship, is now a mare upon the earth. She dwells at the confluence of the Yamuna and the Tamasa in Tapasya. The three worlds are plunged in despair that the goddess of fortune no longer smiles upon them. O Vishnu, your enemies say to her, 'Now your Lord has abandoned you, Lakshmi. Come and spend your time with us.' And they rejoice, seeing her misery. I know what torment you must feel yourself, for I remember what I endured when Sati committed suicide at her father's Daksha's yagya. It is not something I would wish on my worst enemy, let alone on you. I beg you, go down to her at once. Go as a fine lion and give her a child. Let the curse end, and both of you return to Vaikuntha." Chitrarupa's voice was his own again, or one of his countless voices, and he said, "Thus my Lord Shankara asked me to say to you, and yes, my Devi Uma as well." Vishnu had indeed been in torment after he cursed Lakshmi. He quickly found that he could bear their separation far less than she could, but then he could not very well follow her down to the earth without some pretext. That would have meant a terrible loss of face, and after all, he was Vishnu who lies upon the infinite Ananta. He was the Lord of the worlds. But now, Shiva had asked him to do what his heart had cried out to do since the moment Lakshmi had left him. When the messenger left Vaikuntha, it did not take Vishnu an instant before he had turned himself into a great stallion, blue as rain clouds. He flew down to the Sagama of the two rivers on earth. When Devi Lakshmi, the mare, saw that rampant stallion, she gave a whinny of joy. She knew him at once. Flanks steaming, eyes wild with desire, it is told, Vishnu the stallion mounted that white mare beside those rivers, one midnight blue and the other golden. A long time their blissful mating lasted, and then she was pregnant with his child. It took only a moment, and Vishnu's grace and Lakshmi gave birth to a fine infant, his skin blue as the night lotus. Now Vishnu turned to her, smiling, and said, "Now the curse ends, my love. Come, let us return to Vaikuntha." The sky was full of wondrous light, as if someone had drawn back a veil that hid heaven's splendor. Legions of Vimanas appeared, and the Devas riding in them. The largest of them flew down with hardly a whisper beside Vishnu and Lakshmi and waited for them to climb in. The Devi and the Lord were mare and stallion no more, but had back their goddesses and god forms. But now Lakshmi cried, "Oh, my Lord, how can I leave our son here? He is dearer to me than my life." Vishnu said, "He must remain here upon the earth. Have no fear for him. He will be safe. He has a great destiny to fulfill in the world, which is why you and I had to come down from Vaikuntha. Listen, my love. The king Yati has a son named Turvasu, whom his father calls Hari Varman. Even now, Hari Varman sits in tapasya at a sacred tirtha. What he wants is a son. This child of ours is for him. Lakshmi was full of grief, but wisely she did not try to impede destiny. She climbed into Vimana beside Vishnu, and it flashed away back to Vaikuntha. By Vishnu's grace, Lakshmi forgot all about what had happened. She remembered nothing of how he cursed her and she became a mare, nor how he joined her below on earth as a smoky stallion. She remembered nothing of the infant he begot on her. Soon after his natural parents left the world, the little child was playing by himself beside the rivers when a Vidyahara called Champaka and his exotic woman, Madanalasa, flew past that place in their marvelous craft. They saw the beautiful child, bright as a bit of sun. Champaka, the Vidadara, flew down, picked up the child, and gave him to his wife. She was ecstatic. Never had she seen such a lovely child. Why, he was as handsome as a small Kamadeva, even handsomer. She kissed him and cuddled him in delight, then asked Champaka, "Whose child is this, that he is so beautiful? Who abandoned him in the forest? I think Shiva knew how much I wanted a son and gave this baby to me." Champaka replied, "I will go to Indra and ask him whose child this is, whether he is a Deva's, a Gandharva's, or a Danava's baby. If our Lord Indra agrees, he will say the Veda mantra over the little one and take him for our own. But first we must know who he is." The two of them flew quickly as a thought to Amravati. They took the wonderful child with them and said to Indra, "Lord, we found this child on earth where the Jamuna and the Tamasa meet. Whom does he belong to, O Indra? My wife has lost her heart to him. We want to make him our son. If you allow us, we will say the mantras of adoption over him." But Indra said in alarm, "What have you done, Champaka? This child is Vishnu and Lakshmi's son. He was born for Yayati's son, Turvasu, to fulfill a purpose of destiny. Even today, Turvasu will come to this place where the rivers meet, fly back with the infant, and leave him there. Again, this is no common child. Why, the world shall know him as Ekavira one day, for there shall be no other hero on earth like him." In some terror, Champaka flew back at once to the rivers of the earth and left the shining child where he had found him. Meanwhile, the childless king, Turvasu, sat in fierce tapasya in a deep forest. He had sat there unmoving for 100 years. Suddenly, the darkness behind his eyes and the space he was absorbed in were lit up brilliantly. Turvasu opened his eyes and saw Vishnu and Lakshmi had appeared before him. Yayati's son prostrated himself at the Lord's feet. Hari said gently in his voice that was the soft swell of ages, "Arise, my child, let sorrow leave your heart, for I will give you whatever boon you want." Lords of the world, infinite one, how am I blessed to see you today. Only those that have free of all their desires have a vision of you. But I am tangled in a million cares and wants, and yet here you are before me. O Mahavishnu, bless me, Lord, for I don't deserve to see you. Vishnu said, smiling, "Humble king, I am pleased with your bhakti. Now say what boons you want from me." "Lord, I have one desire. that is greater than all the others. O Vishnu, give me a son who is like my very soul. The wise say that Bhakta never knows to which length his God will go to please him. The devotee seldom realizes that it is the one he worships who puts some of his desires into his heart. Now Vishnu said to Turvasu, go to the place where the Yamuna and the Tamasa flow together. You will find a child there, like whom there is no other in any of the three worlds. That child is born from Lakshmi's own womb, and he will be all that you want him to be. Indeed, he will be like your very Atman to you. With that, the blue one and his Devi vanished before the king's eyes. Turvasu fetched the chariot which a Devi had given his father. Yayati once he flew through the air to the place Vishnu told him to go. There he saw a wonderful child playing quietly by himself on the ground. The luster of his body lit the woods around for a league and reaching for the very sky. Turvasu went up to the friendly child and picked it up in his arms. He felt he had drowned in a sea of bliss. The rapture of his deepest soul coursed through King Turvasu. It seemed to him that he held sweet eternity in his arms. Tears welled up in Turvasu's eyes and rolled down his face. He took the brilliant infant back to his city in his vimana. As he neared home, his people and ministers all came out to welcome him after 100 years. Sutras and singers went before Turvasu on his triumphal homecoming. Lovely women threw bright petals and fried rice grains over him and the child. They sang and danced all the way to the palace before his Ratha. Glowing, Turvasu climbed down from the chariot and mounted the marble steps to his palace. Not for a moment did he let the dazzling child down from his arms. He went straight into his queen and placed that child in her arms. She was amazed. She was delighted and cried, "Where did you get him from? He is such a perfect child. Whose is he, my lord? He enchants me. Ah, I feel such delight when I hold him." Turvasu told her who that child was and declared a celebration in the kingdom. They called the boy Eka Vira, and it seemed with his coming, heaven came down to the earth. So said Veda Vyasa to King Janamajaya. Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshwari Mata ki jai, Bole Baba ki jai.